The morning sun painted the sky orange over New Seoul Colony. 8-year-old Minho sat on the porch of his family's small house, watching the farming robots work in the distant fields. The air smelled like fresh earth and the blue flowers his mother grew in their garden. "Minho, come help me with breakfast," called his mother So-young from inside the house. She was a scientist who studied alien plants, always curious about how things grew on their new world. His father Dong-wook was already outside, checking the water systems that kept their crops alive. He built machines that helped humans live on, planets far from Earth. Both his parents worked hard to make New Seoul a safe home for families like theirs. Minho loved mornings like this. The settlement had 50 families, all working together to build a better life. Children played in the streets while adults tended gardens and fixed machines. Everyone knew everyone else. It felt safe and peaceful. He was about to go inside when something caught his eye. Dark shapes moved across the orange sky, growing larger with each passing second. At first, he thought they might be supply ships bringing goods from the main cities. But these ships looked different. They were too big and moved too fast. "Papa!" Minho called out, pointing to the sky. "Look!" Dong-wook stopped working and looked up. His face changed from calm to worried in an instant. "So-young!" he shouted, toward the house. "Come out here now!" More shapes appeared in the sky. Huge black ships with sharp edges, like metal teeth cutting through the clouds. They made no sound as they dropped toward the settlement. The morning birds stopped singing. So-young ran outside, still holding a cooking spoon. She saw the ships and grabbed Minho's hand. "Get inside," she said, her voice tight with fear, but it was too late. The first ship landed in the center of the settlement with a crash that shook the ground. The other ships formed a circle around the entire colony, blocking all escape routes. Dust clouds rose from their landing sites. Large doors opened on the sides of the ships. Things came out that made Minho's heart race with terror. They stood 3 times taller than his father, with long arms that ended in curved claws. Their skin looked like old leather, dark green and covered in scars. Yellow eyes glowed in faces that looked like giant lizards walking on 2 legs. The creatures wore metal armor and carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They moved like hunters, spreading out across the settlement with purpose. Some went toward the houses while others surrounded the landing area where people might try to run. "Kavari," Dong-wook whispered, a word Minho had heard before in scary stories. Space pirates who took people away and never brought them back. The largest of the creatures stood near the central ship. This one wore more armor than the others and had fresh scars across its face, like marks of honor. When it spoke, its voice carried across the entire settlement like thunder. "Humans of this small world," it said in broken human language. "I am Hunt Master Gorthak of the Blood Wake clan. You are now our property. Those who fight will die quickly. Those who surrender will live longer." People began screaming. Some tried to run toward the fields, but the creatures were faster. They caught the runners easily, their long legs covering ground like hunting cats. Others grabbed weapons from their homes, but the alien guns cut through everything humans could build. Dong-wook pushed his family behind their house. "We need to reach the emergency bunker," he said. "If we can get to the radio, we can call for help." They ran through their backyard toward the small concrete building where the settlement kept emergency supplies. Other families had the same idea. The air filled with the sound of energy weapons and human cries. But the creatures had planned for this. They knew where humans would try to hide. 3 of them waited near the bunker, their weapons ready. When the families came running, the aliens were ready. "Stop!" Gorthak's voice boomed again. He had followed them, walking slowly like he had all the time in the world. "Small humans, you think like prey animals, always running to the same safe places." Dong-wook stood in front of his wife and son, holding an old work tool like a weapon. It looked tiny compared to the alien's claws. Stay away from my family. Gorthak made a sound that might have been laughter. Brave words from soft meat. Your kind thinks courage makes you strong, but you are just food that talks. The huntmaster moved faster than something so large should be able to move. His claw struck Dongwook in the chest, sending him flying backward into the bunker wall. So-young screamed and ran to help her husband, but two other creatures grabbed her arms. "Papa!" Minho cried out, trying to run to his father. But Gorthak's huge hand wrapped around his small body, lifting him into the air like he weighed nothing. Dongwook tried to get up, blood running down his shirt. "Let him go," he gasped. "Take me instead." "No," Gorthak said, studying Minho with those yellow eyes. "Small ones are better, easier to break, more fun to hunt. This one will provide good sport before we eat him." Minho watched as the other creatures dragged his parents toward the ships. His mother was crying and reaching for him. His father kept trying to fight even though he could barely stand. Around the settlement, the same scene played out as families were torn apart. Some of the aliens carried large bags filled with things they had stolen from houses. Others herded groups of humans toward the ships like farm animals. The creatures worked quickly, taking what they wanted and destroying the rest. "Why are you doing this?" Minho asked, his voice small in the alien's grip. Gorthak looked down at him with something like surprise. "You speak. Good. Prey that talks is more interesting." He carried Minho toward the largest ship. "We do this because we can. Because you are weak and we are strong. Because taking things from soft species is what we have always done." The inside of the ship was dark and hot, with metal walls that sweated moisture. The air smelled like old blood and fear. Gorthak threw Minho into a small cage with other children from different planets. Some were human, but others looked like nothing he had ever seen. Through the bars, Minho watched as the creatures loaded their prizes onto the ship. His parents were pushed into a different cage, too far away for him to reach them. His mother saw him and mouthed words he could not hear over the noise. The ship's engines started with a roar that shook everything inside. Through a small window, Minho saw New Seoul getting smaller as they lifted into the sky. The settlement that had been his whole world became just dots on the ground, then disappeared completely as they entered space. Other children in the cage cried or sat in silent shock. An older human boy who looked maybe 15 years old moved closer to Minho. "I'm Jiho," he whispered. "I've been here longer than the others. If you want to live, listen to everything I tell you." As the ship jumped into hyperspace, carrying them away from everything they had ever known, Minho made a promise to himself. Somehow he would see his parents again. Somehow he would make the creatures pay for what they had done. The Huntmaster. Gorthak had called him prey. But looking through the cage bars at the aliens who thought they owned him, Minho felt something growing inside his chest. That was not fear. It was anger, cold and patient as winter ice. They would learn they had made a mistake. The ship called Bloodwake moved through space like a hungry beast. Minho had been in the cage for 3 weeks now, counting days by when the lights dimmed to create false night. The metal walls around him hummed with power, and the air tasted like rust and old fear. Jiho had become his teacher in this floating prison. The older boy knew things that kept prisoners alive longer. "Never look them in the eyes," he whispered during one of the dark periods. "They think it means you want to fight. And never cry where they can see you. They like it when we show pain." Minho learned quickly. He watched everything with careful eyes, like his father had taught him when fixing broken machines. Every detail mattered when you were trying to understand how something worked. The Kavari guards came twice a day to bring food and water. The food was gray paste that tasted like nothing, but it kept them alive. Minho noticed that different guards worked, different shifts. Some were cruel and enjoyed frightening the prisoners. Others just did their jobs and left. The one called Vorthak seemed to be second in command. He was smaller than Huntmaster Gorthak, but moved with quiet danger. When Vorthak walked past the cages, even the cruel guards became nervous. Minho filed this information away in his memory. "Tell me about them," Minho asked Jiho one night. "How do they think?" Jiho glanced around to make sure no guards were listening. "They live for hunting. Everything is about being stronger than something else. The bigger ones boss around the smaller ones. They respect strength, but only their kind of strength." "What kind is that?" "Fighting, killing, taking things from others." Jiho's voice was bitter. "They think we are weak because we build things instead of destroying them, because we care about each other instead of only ourselves." Minho thought about this. His parents had taught him that caring for others made humans strong, not weak. But maybe the Kavari could not understand that kind of strength. During the long hours in the cage, Minho exercised in secret. He did push-ups and sit-ups when the guards were not watching. He stretched his muscles and tested how fast he could move in small spaces. His body was changing, growing stronger from the constant fear and anger. Sometimes he felt strange energy running through him, like electricity in his blood. It happened most when he thought about his parents or remembered Gorthak's yellow eyes. The feeling scared him a little, but it also made him feel more alive. "You are different from when you first came here," Jiho said one day. "You do not look like a scared little boy anymore." Minho touched his face. It felt thinner, sharper somehow. "What do I look like now?" "Like someone who is planning something." The ship stopped moving through hyperspace several times to raid other worlds. Each time, new prisoners filled the cages. Minho watched how the Kavari treated different species. Some aliens they kept alive for work. Others went to different parts of the ship and never came back. Children always went to the same section where Minho was kept. He realized with cold understanding that young ones from any species were special to the Kavari, not special in a good way. "They save us for something," he told Jiho. "I know." The older boy's voice was quiet. "I have heard them talking. There is a place where they take young prisoners. For hunting." Minho felt that electric feeling again, stronger this time. Hunting. Like a game for them. They let us run, then they chase us. If we survive long enough, they say we win freedom. But no one ever wins. How long do we have to survive? 7 days. But the longest anyone has lasted is 2. Minho stored this information with everything else he had learned. 7 days. He would need to be ready. During feeding time, he began watching how the guards opened the cage locks. The mechanism was simple, but the guards always stood in specific places when they used it. They followed patterns without thinking, like machines themselves. He also noticed that the Kavari moved differently during the ship's night cycle. They were slower, less alert. Jiho had mentioned they were cold-blooded, needing heat to stay active. When the ship's temperature dropped for the night period, the aliens became sluggish. "Why do they keep the ship so cold at night?" Minho asked. "To save power, I think. And maybe because they sleep better when it is cool." Another useful fact. Minho was building a picture of his enemies in his mind, finding their weaknesses like his father found flaws in broken equipment. The worst part was when Gorthak came to visit the prisoners. The huntmaster would walk slowly past the cages, studying. The children like he was shopping for something special. His yellow eyes would focus on each face, measuring strength and fear. "This one grows stronger," Gorthak said during one visit, stopping in front of Minho's cage. "Good. Weak prey is no fun to hunt." Minho kept his eyes down but felt the alien's attention like heat from a fire. Part of him wanted to spit at the creature to show his anger. But he remembered Jiho's lessons about staying alive. "You will provide sport when we reach the hunting grounds," Gorthak continued. I will enjoy breaking you slowly. After the huntmaster left, Jiho moved closer to Minho. He has chosen you for something special. That is bad. Why? Because when Gorthak picks someone personally, he likes to make the hunt last longer. He will hurt you in ways that do not kill, just to watch you suffer. Minho thought about this. If Gorthak wanted a long hunt, that meant more time to plan and act. Maybe being chosen was not entirely bad. That night, he dreamed of New Soul. He saw his parents working in their garden, his mother's hands gentle with the blue flowers. His father showed him how water moved through pipes, how pressure could be controlled and directed. Every system has a weak point, his father's voice said in the dream. Find it and you can bring down anything, no matter how big. Minho woke with new understanding. The Kavari ship was just another system. Their society was just another machine with moving parts. Everything had weaknesses if you knew how to look. Over the following days, he watched and learned with new purpose. He memorized guard schedules and ship sounds. He tested his growing strength and speed in secret. He listened to alien conversations, picking up words in their harsh language. Most importantly, he felt that electric energy in his body getting stronger. Whatever was happening to him, it felt connected to his anger and his need to survive. Like his body was preparing itself for something. How much longer until we reach this hunting place? He asked Jiho. Maybe 2 weeks. Why? Because I am going to be ready. Jiho looked at him with worried eyes. Ready for what? Minho smiled, and for the first time since his capture, it was not a scared child's smile. It was something else entirely, ready to teach them that humans are not prey. The ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Corvash Prime. Through the small windows, Minho saw a world of red sand and black rocks reaching toward a burning orange sky. This was the Kavari home world, where they had hunted for thousands of years. Wake up, little prey, a guard snarled, opening the cage doors. Time to see your new home. Minho and the other prisoners were herded off the ship onto a landing platform carved from solid rock. The air was hot and dry, making it hard to breathe. Tall towers rose around them, built from the same black stone as the cliffs. This was not just a landing area, it was a fortress. Guards with energy weapons surrounded the prisoners as they walked toward a massive gate. Strange symbols covered the walls, probably telling stories of famous hunts from the past. Minho tried to remember every detail of the path they took. Beyond the gate lay the processing center. Here, new prisoners were sorted like goods at a market. Some went to work areas, others to holding pens. The youngest, including Minho, were taken to a special section marked with symbols that looked like running animals. Welcome to the preparation facility, said a voice in perfect human language. Minho turned to see a human woman walking toward them. She was older than his mother, with gray hair and tired eyes, but she moved with quiet authority, like someone who had learned to survive in a dangerous place. I am Yura, she said to the new arrivals. I will help you understand what comes next. Some of the children began asking desperate questions, but Yura raised her hand for silence. Listen carefully. Your lives depend on understanding the rules. Here. She led them through corridors lined with empty cells. Each cell was big enough for one person, with a small bed and basic washing area. Clean, but cold, like everything the Kavari built. You are being prepared for the hunting grounds, Yura explained as they walked. It is a tradition older than human civilization. Young beings from across the galaxy are brought here to provide sport for Kavari warriors. How long have you been here? Asked a girl who looked about Minho's age. 15 years. I was captured during one of the first raids on human colonies. Yura's voice stayed calm, but Minho heard the pain underneath. I survived by making myself useful. Now I help new arrivals understand what they face. They entered a large room with maps covering the walls. The map showed a vast area of canyons, caves, and ancient ruins. Red lines marked dangerous areas. Blue dots showed water sources. Green squares marked supply caches. "This is the hunting ground," Yura said, pointing to the largest map. 200 square kilometers of the most challenging terrain on this planet. It was designed over centuries to test both predator and prey. Minho studied the map carefully. The layout reminded him of a maze, with only a few clear paths between high canyon walls. Most of the area was underground tunnel systems connecting to surface ruins. "The rules are simple," Yura continued. "You get a 6-hour head start. Then, the hunters come after you. If you survive 7 days, you win freedom. If you are caught, you become their dinner." "Has anyone ever won?" Jiho asked quietly. Yura looked at him for a long moment. "No, but some have lasted longer than others. The record is 3 days. Over." The next week, Yura taught them everything she could about survival. Which plants were safe to eat, how to find water in dry places, basic first aid for wounds, how to move quietly and hide tracks. But she also taught them things the Kavari did not know she was teaching, like how some of the ancient ruins had hidden passages marked with symbols only humans could read, how certain power cells in the ruins could be turned into explosive devices, how the underground streams could be used to travel unseen. "Why are you helping us?" Minho asked during one of their private lessons. "Because every child who lasts longer in the hunt costs the Kavari resources and reputation. Because I remember being young and afraid, and because maybe someday one of you will be smart enough and strong enough to change things." She looked directly at him when she said this, and Minho felt she saw something in him that others missed. During the nights, Minho exercised in his cell. His body continued changing, growing harder and faster. The electric feeling in his blood was constant now, like power waiting to be used. He could feel his senses getting sharper, his reflexes quicker. Sometimes other prisoners would scream in their sleep, having nightmares about the hunt. Minho never screamed. His dreams were different. He dreamed of running through dark tunnels, of setting traps, of watching his enemies fall into holes he had dug. On the 7th day, Gorthak came to inspect the new arrivals. He walked past each cell, studying the prisoners like a farmer looking at livestock. When he reached Minho's cell, he stopped and smiled with too many teeth. "You look ready, small human. Strong enough to provide good sport, but not too strong to make it easy for yourself." "When do we start?" Minho asked, meeting the alien's yellow eyes for the first time. Gorthak's smile grew wider. "Tomorrow at dawn. You will have your 6 hours to run and hide. Then I will come for you personally. I have been looking forward to this hunt for weeks." After the huntmaster left, Yura appeared at Minho's cell door. She slipped something small through the bars. It was a piece of metal, sharp, on one end and wrapped in cloth. "Hide this well," she whispered. "The ruins have loose stones that can be pried apart with the right tool. And remember, humans see better in dim light than Kavari do. Use the twilight hours." "What happened to your family?" Minho asked suddenly. Yura was quiet for a long moment. "They died fighting to protect me, just like your parents fought for you. Do not let their sacrifice be meaningless." That night, Minho lay on his narrow bed and thought about everything he had learned. The hunting ground was designed to trap prey, but every trap could be turned against the trapper with enough knowledge and preparation. The Kavari thought they were releasing a frightened child into their maze. They had no idea they were about to face something that had been preparing for war since the day they took him from his home. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin, but Minho was no longer the scared boy who had been captured on New Sol. He was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. He was a human child with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Dawn painted the sky red over the hunting grounds as Minho stood at the entrance gate. The metal doors towered above him, covered in scratches from the claws of countless hunters. Beyond them lay 200 square kilometers of death waiting to happen. Gorthak stood nearby with 11 other Kavari warriors, all wearing hunting armor decorated with trophies from previous kills. Their weapons gleamed in the morning light, energy rifles that could cut through stone. "Remember the rules. Little prey," the huntmaster said, his yellow eyes bright with anticipation. 6 hours to run, 7 days to survive. When the time comes, I will find you. The gates opened with a grinding sound that echoed through the canyons. Minho walked forward without looking back, his small pack bouncing against his shoulders. Inside were basic supplies Yura had given him, plus the sharp metal tool hidden in the bottom. The moment he passed through the gates, they slammed shut behind him. Now he was alone in the most dangerous place on the Kavari homeworld, with nothing but his wits and determination to keep him alive. Minho immediately turned away from the obvious paths. Most prey would run straight ahead, trying to get as far from the entrance as possible. That was exactly what the hunters expected. Instead, he headed for the narrowest canyon passage he could find, one barely wide enough for his small body. The passage led down into darkness, winding between walls of black rock that seemed to press in from both sides. Perfect. The Kavari were much larger than humans. They would have trouble following him through spaces like this. After an hour of careful climbing, he reached an underground chamber filled with ancient ruins. Broken pillars and fallen walls created a maze within the maze. Strange symbols covered every surface, telling stories in languages forgotten before humans learned to speak. This was where his real work began. Using the metal tool Yura had given him, Minho began prying loose stones from the crumbling walls. Each stone became a weapon or a trap component. He tested their weight and balance, choosing the ones that flew truest when thrown. In one corner of the chamber, he found what he was looking for: ancient power cells, still glowing faintly with stored energy. His father had taught him about energy storage systems. These cells were old, but still functional, and more importantly, they were unstable enough to be dangerous. Minho carefully removed 6 power cells from their housings and wrapped them in torn pieces of his clothing. With the right trigger, they would explode with enough force to bring down part of the ceiling. The Kavari would not expect their prey to understand their own ancient technology. The hours passed quickly as he prepared. He dug shallow pits in the narrow passages and covered them with loose stones and debris. He rigged falling stone traps using the ruins' unstable architecture. He found a hidden water source and filled every container he could make from broken pottery. When he estimated 5 hours had passed, Minho moved deeper into the tunnel system. The passages here were even narrower, carved by water over thousands of years. He could move through them easily, but a Kavari warrior would have to crawl. He found the perfect spot for his first stand, a chamber with only one entrance, surrounded by unstable walls he had carefully weakened with strategic stone removal. Everything was ready. The 6th hour ended with a horn blast that echoed through the entire hunting ground. The hunt had begun. Minho did not have to wait long. Heavy footsteps echoed through the tunnels as the hunting party spread out to search for him. They moved with confidence, talking loudly to each other in their harsh language. They were not worried about being heard. Why would they be when hunting small prey? The first Kavari warrior to find his trail was called Zarok, a young hunter eager to prove himself. He followed Minho's deliberately obvious tracks to the narrow passage, then began squeezing through the tight space with difficulty. Minho waited in the chamber beyond, hidden behind a fallen pillar. When Zarok finally emerged from the passage, breathing heavily from the effort, he was met by a shower of precisely thrown stones. The rocks struck the warrior's head and shoulders, causing him to stumble backward in surprise, but Kavari armor was strong, and the stones did little real damage. Zarok roared in anger and raised his energy weapon. That was exactly what Minho had been waiting for. As the alien fired at his hiding spot, the energy beam struck one of the weakened support pillars. The ancient stone cracked and began to fall, bringing down a section of the ceiling. Zarok tried to run back toward the passage, but there was not enough room to move quickly. The falling rocks caught him in the narrow space, crushing his body against the canyon walls. His roar of anger became a scream of pain, then silence. Minho emerged from his hiding place and carefully approached the rubble. The warrior was dead, his energy weapon buried under tons of stone. But his armor was intact and might be useful. Working quickly, Minho stripped what he could carry from the dead hunter. A smaller energy pistol that had been clipped to Zarok's belt. Food packets designed for Kavari digestion but safe for humans. Most importantly, a communication device that would let him hear what the other hunters were saying. Through the communicator, he heard Gorthak's angry voice demanding a report from Zarok. When no answer came, the Huntmaster sent 2 more warriors to investigate. Minho was already gone, deeper in the tunnel system when they found their dead companion. Their shocked voices carried clearly through the stone passages. No prey had ever killed a hunter before. Their easy confidence was beginning to crack. On the second day, Minho struck again. He had learned the hunting party's movement patterns by listening to their communications. They were spreading out in a standard search grid, assuming their prey would try to run to the edges of the hunting ground. Instead, Minho moved toward the center, using passages too small for his enemies to follow. He found another perfect ambush site in the ruins of an ancient temple, where centuries of weather had made the roof supports dangerously weak. This time, 2 hunters came together, being more careful after Zarok's death. They were called Mortak and Javan, older warriors with many hunt trophies on their armor. They entered the temple chamber with weapons ready, scanning for any sign of their target. Minho had prepared something special for them. 3 power cells wired together with metal. Strips torn from debris, creating a crude but effective explosive device. When the hunters reached the center of the chamber, he triggered it from his hiding place behind the altar. The explosion brought down most of the temple roof. Both warriors disappeared under the falling stones, their screams cut short by the crash of ancient masonry. The blast also weakened other parts of the ruin, causing secondary collapses that would make the area dangerous for anyone else to search. Now the communications were filled with fear as well as anger. 3 warriors dead in 2 days, killed by a human child they had expected to catch within hours. Gorthak's voice had lost its confident tone, replaced by something Minho had never heard from a Kavari before: uncertainty. On the 3rd day, the remaining hunters changed their tactics. Instead of spreading out, they moved in a tight group, watching every shadow and testing every step. They had learned to fear the places where their prey might be hiding, but fear made them predictable. When people are scared, they avoid anything that looks dangerous and stick to what seems safe. Minho used this knowledge to herd them exactly where he wanted them to go. The final trap was the most complex. A series of connected passages that led to a large underground cavern where ancient Kavari had once held ceremonies. The cavern had multiple entrances but only one safe exit, a weakness Minho had discovered during his exploration. Using debris and carefully placed stones, he blocked all but 2 of the entrances. Then he waited, listening to the hunters' communications as they approached his chosen killing ground. When the remaining 8 warriors entered the cavern, they found themselves in a space designed to amplify sound and confuse direction. Their own voices echoed from every wall, making it impossible to locate each other accurately. Minho struck from above, having climbed to a ledge near the cavern roof. Power cell explosives placed at key points brought down sections of the ceiling, dividing the hunting party and trapping some under fallen rocks. In the chaos that followed, He moved like a shadow between the pillars and debris, picking off confused warriors with thrown stones and the energy pistol he had taken from Zarok. The Kavari tried to regroup, but the cavern's acoustics turned their shouts into confusing echoes. By the time the dust settled, only Gorthak and 2 other hunters remained alive. The Huntmaster's voice over the communicator was no longer that of a confident predator. It was the voice of someone who had realized he was no longer the one doing the hunting. "What are you?" Gorthak whispered into his communicator, as if speaking to Minho directly. Hidden in the shadows above them, Minho smiled and whispered back through the dead warrior's device. "I am what you made me." On the 4th day, Huntmaster Gorthak did something no Kavari leader had ever done in the history of the hunting grounds. He called for help. Through the stolen communicator, Minho heard the shame in the alien's voice as he spoke to his ship. "Commanders, send reinforcements to the hunting ground. Bring heavy weapons and air support. The traditional hunt rules are suspended." The response came back, filled with disbelief. "Huntmaster, you began with 12 warriors against 1 small human. What assistance do you require? Just send them," Gorthak snarled. "And bring the barrier generators online to full power. Nothing gets in or out of this area until the prey is dead." Minho listened from his hiding place in the ancient temple ruins. So the Huntmaster was abandoning honor to save face. That told him something important about Kavari psychology. When they felt truly threatened, they would break their own rules to survive. But calling for reinforcements would take time. The hunting ground was large, and the Kavari would need to position their new forces carefully. That gave Minho at least 6 hours to prepare his final gambit. He had been saving the most dangerous part of his plan for exactly this situation. During his exploration of the ruins, he had found the central power distribution node for the entire hunting ground complex. Ancient but still functional, it controlled the energy barriers that kept prey from escaping and powered the monitoring systems that let spectators watch the hunts. More importantly, it was connected to the planetary power grid that supplied the Kavari fortress above. If he could overload the system correctly, he could create an electromagnetic pulse that would disable all electronic systems in the area. The node was located in the deepest part of the ruins, behind barriers that had kept treasure hunters out for centuries. But Minho was not interested in treasure. He wanted the fusion cores that powered the entire system. Getting to the power node meant crossing open ground where airborne hunters could spot him easily. But Minho had learned to use the Kavari's own nature against them. They expected prey, to hide and run. They would not expect it to move toward the most dangerous part of their territory. He made his approach during the heat of midday, when the desert sun made thermal imaging difficult and the bright light created harsh shadows to hide in. Moving from ruin to ruin, he worked his way toward the central complex. The reinforcements arrived just as he reached the power node chamber. Through cracks in the ancient walls, he could see aircraft circling overhead, while ground troops took positions around the hunting area. They had brought enough firepower to level the entire ruins if necessary. "Small human," Gorthak's voice boomed from speakers placed throughout the hunting ground. "You have fought well, but this ends now. Surrender and your death will be quick." Minho did not answer. He was too busy working on the power cores, using techniques his father had taught him about energy systems. The fusion reactors were incredibly old, but built to last. They had been running for thousands of years without major maintenance. That was exactly what made them dangerous. Age had made the containment systems fragile. The right kind of feedback loop could cause them to overload, catastrophically. "Very well," Gorthak continued. "If you will not surrender, we will destroy every building in this complex until we find your body." The first missile strikes began hitting the outer ruins. Massive explosions shook the ground and sent clouds of debris into the air. The Kavari were being systematic, working their way inward toward the central areas where they assumed their prey was hiding. Minho worked faster, sweat dripping onto the ancient control panels as he rerouted power flows and disabled safety systems. The reactor cores began to glow brighter as energy built up beyond their normal operating limits. Through the stolen communicator, he could hear the aircraft pilots reporting their progress. Section 7 destroyed. Moving to Section 8. No sign of target yet. Keep firing, Gorthak ordered. Level everything if you have to. I want that human found. The explosions were getting closer. Dust and small stones fell from the ceiling as the bombardment shook the entire underground complex. Soon they would reach the power node chamber, and Minho's work would be finished one way or another, but he needed just a few more minutes. The reactor feedback loop was almost ready, building toward the cascade failure that would overload the entire system. Warning lights flashed on panels that had not seen maintenance since before humans learned to build cities. Section 12. Destroyed, came another pilot report. Wait, we have movement in Section 13. Small figure running between buildings. Minho smiled as he put the finishing touches on his sabotage. That small figure was a bundle of clothing he had rigged to move in the wind, designed to draw attention away from his real location. The Kavari were so focused on finding him that they fell for the simple deception. All aircraft, concentrate fire on Section 13, Gorthak commanded. I want nothing left standing in that area. The bombardment intensified, but now it was focused on the wrong target. Explosions lit up the false dawn as the aliens poured firepower into empty ruins while their real enemy worked in the chamber beneath their feet. Finally, the reactor cores reached critical overload. Minho triggered the cascade failure and ran for the chamber's exit as fast as his legs could carry him. Behind him, warning alarms began screaming from control panels that had been silent for millennia. The electromagnetic pulse erupted outward like an invisible wave of destruction. Every electronic system within 50 kilometers shut down instantly. Aircraft fell from the sky as their engines died. Ground troops found their weapons and armor completely powerless. Even the energy barriers around the hunting ground flickered and failed. In the sudden silence that followed, with no engine noise or electronic chatter, Minho could hear something he had not expected. Panic in Kavari voices as they realized they were stranded in the hunting ground with a human who had just demonstrated he could bring down their entire technological civilization. But Minho was not finished. While the aliens stumbled around, in the darkness, trying to understand what had happened to their equipment, he made his way toward the one target that mattered most. Huntmaster Gorthak was trapped somewhere in the ruins, cut off from his reinforcements and stripped of his technological advantages. After 4 days of being hunted, it was time for Minho to do some hunting of his own. The electromagnetic pulse had not just disabled their equipment, it had turned the hunting ground into a level playing field where only skill, knowledge, and determination mattered. And in those areas, Minho had been preparing for this moment since the day they took him from his family. The Huntmaster had made a mistake when he chose to hunt a human child. Now he was about to learn why that mistake would be his last. Through the darkness of the powerless ruins, Minho moved like a shadow toward his final confrontation. The roles had reversed completely. Now Gorthak was the prey, and somewhere in the maze of ancient stone and twisted metal, death was coming for him on small, quiet feet. In the darkness of the powerless ruins, Minho stalked his final prey. Without their technology, the Kavari were just large, clumsy animals stumbling through terrain they did not really understand. The hunting ground had been designed by their ancestors, but none of the current generation had ever navigated it without electronic assistance. Minho, however, had spent 4 days learning every stone and shadow. He moved through the blackness like he was walking through his own bedroom, while Gorthak and his remaining warriors crashed into walls and tripped over debris. He found the Huntmaster in what had once been the ceremonial arena at the heart of the complex. Ancient stone seats rose in circles around a central fighting space, where countless hunts had ended over the centuries. Gorthak was there alone, having become separated from his last two warriors in the confusion following the pulse. The massive alien sat on the arena floor, trying to get his equipment working again. His energy weapons were dead metal in his hands. His armor was just heavy clothing without its power systems. For the first time since Minho had known him, Gorthak looked vulnerable. "I know you are there, small human," the Huntmaster said without looking up. "I can smell your scent. Human fear has a particular odor." Minho stepped into the arena, but he was not afraid anymore. The electric feeling that had been building in his body for weeks was now a steady current of controlled power. "I do not smell like fear. You do." Gorthak looked up, his yellow eyes reflecting the faint light that filtered down from above. Even in the darkness, Minho could see the alien's surprise. This was not the voice of a frightened child. "You have caused me much trouble, little prey." "My warriors are dead. My reputation is damaged. The clan will question my leadership because of you." "Good," Minho said simply. The Huntmaster rose to his full height, still twice as tall as the human child facing him, his claws extended from his fingertips, the only weapons he had left. "But it ends here. No more tricks, no more traps, just predator and prey, as nature intended." "You are right," Minho agreed. "Just predator and prey." Gorthak lunged forward with surprising speed for something so large. But Minho was no longer the scared boy who had been captured on New Sol. Weeks of constant danger had changed his body, in ways that surprised even him. He dodged the alien's attack and rolled to the side, coming up with a sharp piece of metal debris in his hand. The Huntmaster spun to follow his movement, but Minho was already gone, disappearing into the shadows. At the edge of the arena, years of evolution had given Kavari excellent night vision, but human eyes were better at seeing in partial darkness like this. "Stand and fight," Gorthak roared, swiping at empty air. "Stop hiding like a coward." "You mean stop fighting like prey?" Minho's voice came from the darkness. "But I am not prey anymore." What followed was not really a fight. It was a lesson in the difference between a hunter and a killer. Gorthak had spent his life hunting creatures that ran away from him. He had never faced anything that hunted him. Back Minho struck from the shadows, cutting at the alien's legs and arms with his improvised blade. Small wounds that would not kill quickly but would weaken and slow his enemy. Each attack came from a different direction, keeping Gorthak spinning and confused. The Huntmaster's roars of anger turned to grunts of pain, then to something that sounded almost like fear. He had never been the one being stalked before. Never. Been the one bleeding while an unseen enemy circled just beyond his reach. "What are you?" Gorthak gasped, blood running down his arms from a dozen cuts. "I am the child you stole from his family," Minho said, his voice coming from directly behind the alien. "I am the prey that learned to hunt. I am what humans become when you push us too far." The final strike came when Gorthak stumbled over debris, made clumsy by blood loss and exhaustion. Minho was there instantly, the sharp metal finding the gap between armor plates at the alien's throat. The Huntmaster's yellow eyes went wide with shock, then slowly lost their light. In the silence that followed, Minho stood over the body of the creature that had taken everything from him. He felt no joy in the victory, only emptiness where his anger had been. Gorthak's death would not bring back his parents or undo the pain of the last weeks, but it would send a message that would echo across the galaxy. The electromagnetic pulse had not just disabled electronics in the hunting ground. It had also brought down the energy barriers that kept the area sealed. For the first time in centuries, the sacred hunting ground was open to the outside world. Minho made his way through the powerless ruins toward the main complex where the prisoners were held. Without electronic locks, the cages that held captured beings from across the galaxy were just metal boxes with mechanical latches. He found Yura first, still in her supervisory quarters. The older woman looked at him with amazement, seeing the blood on his clothes, and the calm certainty in his eyes. "You did it," she said softly. "You actually did it." "Help me free the others," Minho replied. "We are leaving this place." Working together, they released dozens of prisoners from the holding areas. Humans, but also beings from other species who had been waiting their turn in the hunting grounds. All of them looked at the human child who had accomplished what no one thought possible. Among the freed prisoners was Jiho, thinner than before, but alive. The older boy stared at Minho as if seeing him for the first time. "What happened to you out there?" "I learned who I really am," Minho answered. The escape from Corvash Prime was easier than anyone expected. The electromagnetic pulse had disabled most of the fortress's defenses, and the Kavari were too busy trying to restore basic systems to organize an effective response. By the time they realized what was happening, Yura had already stolen a transport ship and launched toward the edge of the system. The journey back to human space took months, but word of their escape traveled faster. News networks across the galaxy picked up the story of the human child who had killed Hunt Master Gorthak and destroyed the sacred hunting ground of the Kavari. Other alien species who had suffered under Kavari raids began to see humans differently. If a single human youngling could do such damage to their most feared predators, what could organized human forces accomplish? The Kavari themselves were thrown into chaos. Gorthak's death sparked a succession crisis that split the clan into warring factions. Their reputation as unstoppable hunters was shattered. Most importantly, they began to avoid human space entirely, unwilling to risk facing another opponent like Minho. When the stolen transport finally reached New Sol Colony, Minho found a world transformed. What had been a small farming settlement was now a fortified military base with defensive systems that could hold off a fleet. And waiting for him on the landing platform were two figures he had not dared to hope he would see again. "Minho!" his mother Soyoung cried, running toward the ship as soon as it landed. Behind her came Dongwook, moving more slowly but with tears streaming down his face. The reunion was everything Minho had dreamed of during the darkest moments aboard the Kavari ship. His parents held him like they would never let go, and for a moment he was just a child again, safe in his family's arms. But the moment passed. Minho had been changed by his experiences in ways that could never be undone. His parents saw it in his eyes, the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the worst the galaxy could offer and emerged victorious. "What happened to you out there?" his father asked quietly. "I learned that humans are not prey," Minho replied, "and I made sure the rest of the galaxy learned it too." In the years that followed, Minho's story spread throughout human space and beyond. Children who had once cowered at the mention of alien raiders now stood straighter, knowing that even the youngest human could be dangerous when threatened. Military academies studied his tactics. Colonial defense forces trained using scenarios based on his survival techniques. Most importantly, potential raiders from other species looked at human settlements and remembered what had happened to the mighty Kavari, who thought humans were easy prey. Minho himself grew up to become a teacher and protector, passing on the skills he had learned in the hunting ground to a new generation of human defenders. He never spoke about the details of his time with the Kavari, but those who trained with him quickly learned that humanity's capacity for violence, when properly directed, was something that could protect the innocent and terrify those who would harm them. The boy who had been taken as prey had returned as something far more dangerous. He had become living proof that humans, no matter how small or young, were never helpless victims. They were apex predators waiting for the right moment to show their teeth.